Hi there everybody, welcome back to this week's video and I'm tucked up inside the garage here in the middle of Storm Barra, I think it is. So if there's any background noise with regard to whistling and wind noise and rain noise, that's probably why. It's because we're sort of in the middle of 48 hours of high winds and lashing rain, typical sort of December winter weather here in the UK. This week's video, I'm actually preparing for next week's video, which is my typical end of year. Well, I did the same one last year about running costs and costs of ownership and cost of running 6 sort of modern classic cars or sports cars. In doing that, I came onto a topic that I had lots of interest 12 months ago about car insurance and road tax. Vehicle excise duty is the sort of VED is the term they use nowadays, but everyone knows it as road tax. So just pertinent to the UK markets, if you're non-UK, just be aware that we in the UK have to pay a tax for using your car on the road, and obviously the car insurance that may be applicable sort of externally as well. So, and it's all about, I've called it cost savings, but it's all about making sure you just pay the right amount of money. There's a few tips that I do for both. So first of all, I was going to talk about VED, vehicle excise duty, road tax to you and I. That's what we all know it as. There's a couple of really key parts to this. And this is all to make sure you keep the costs down to a manageable level. And I'll show you, really demonstrate with my 6 cars what it could cost and what I actually pay. And it's probably, I only pay probably half what I could do if I wasn't as vigilant when it comes to road tax. First of all is road tax changed in the start of the early noughties, in the early 2000s, in fact 2001, yes, 1st of March 2001. Road tax changed. Any car registered before the 1st of March 2001, it was purely based on engine size, and it was any engine that was 1549cc. So anything sort of above 1.6 or above paid the higher rate, and anything below 1.6 or 1.549 paid the lower rate. But in 2001 it changed to become based on emissions, with a whole sequence of tiers going from Group A all the way up to Group K. And that was up until the first key date, or the key date, that you need to remember. And that key date is, the 23rd of March 2006. So that is the date that they introduced 2 other categories, higher categories, categories L and categories M. Now, L and M were a big step change. They weren't, all the others were incremental, like from A all the way through. They were all relatively stepping stones. A, B, C were particularly low. There's a bit of a jump to D, and then all the way up through to K. But then they introduced these 2 new categories. And these were for cars that emitted more than 225 grams of CO2 per kilometre. And that was the key value. And what that was doing, it was the UK government really trying to crush down for these gas-guzzling sports cars. And I've got a couple of examples to show you that actually it's not necessarily just sports cars that they hit with this. But it was the heavy polluting cars. You're going to pay a premium if you want one of these cars. Irrespective, it has to be said, of mileage. So you could have a car that does very few miles, either of these, my STI here or the MX-5, although the MX-5 is different because that's pre-2001 obviously, but the STI is a good example that we're going to come on to. So, and the tax that you pay after the 23rd of March 2006 is significantly more if your car generates more than these 225 grams for CO2 per kilometre. So it's not coincidental that all apart from my everyday Megane that I use, which is a later car, but all my sports cars, specifically that were manufactured in and around the mid-2000s, are all pre-March 2006. And a really good example is the STI. So the Blob Eye STI, the late Blob Eye STIs, the wide tracks, 2005, early 2006. In fact, I've seen one actually was a very, very late registered 2007. But largely 05, early 06, you can certainly get Blob Eye wide tracks post March 2006. The example here is, on this car, the same colour, the same spec. This is a December 2005. I pay £340 if I paid over a year for the STI. If it was a 23rd of March 2006 or newer, so in other words, if it was just 3 months newer than this current car, exactly the same car, it would jump from £340 to £600. That is an increase of over 76%. And it's not just cars like this, because actually my everyday 4x4 that I need in this rural area, we've got the dogs, etc. We've got, goes off-road, so I need 4x4 capability. My Shogun Sport, a car that is as slow as they come, a 2.5 litre turbo diesel unit, that is the same. That's another very late 2005. They manufactured them all the way through to 2008. But mine, late 2005, £340. Again, that would jump up to £600 for exactly the same car if it was post the 23rd of March 2006. So, really key date, if you're looking at buying a car, a gas guzzler or a sports car or a performance car that was manufactured during the 2000s and bridges that March 2006 time period, it is definitely worth finding one that is pre-23rd of March 2006. If you take just the STI and just my Shogun Sport alone, that's £260 on each car that I'm saving if I was to put the road tax on them for the whole year. Over £500 just on those two cars alone because I bought them pre-March 2006. That's the first one. The second one is, I've got 6 cars. If I put road tax and tax them all for 12 months, all 6 of them, I'd be looking at with they're all barring one pre-March 2006, I'd still be looking at somewhere in the region of £2,000 on road tax. But I don't do that. What I do is I put road tax on them and then take them off the road, which is called in the UK SORN, statutory off the road notification, on a month-by-month basis. And I pay for my road tax on a month-by-month basis. And the reason for that is because on average, I'll only have 3, at most 4 cars on the road any given month. And that means instead of spending £2,000 of road tax, I have a road tax bill of probably not much more than £1,000 per year. How do I do it? Well, you've got to be really careful because if you go into a month and you decide to take your car off the road at any point in that month, then as soon as you've made your car SORN, it is illegal then to drive your car on the road. However, you will pay for the whole of that month. So what you don't want to do is get to the 2nd or the 5th or the 10th of the month and SORN your car. Because even though you've SORNed it and you can't put it on the road anymore, you've actually paid for that whole month. So what I do is I use my phone, I set a reminder on the last day of every month, a buzzer goes, warns me, what cars do you want to SORN? And that means on the last day of every month, I decide what cars I'm going to SORN. The SORN process on using the DVLA website takes probably less, but certainly no more than 2 minutes. It is a really quick and simple activity you can do. I decide what I'm going to use, what I don't want to use. If a car's already SORN, I don't do anything. If it's taxed and I want to SORN it, it takes me 2 minutes per car. That's all it takes. And that means I've had full use of the month of using the car, and then I SORN it, say, on that last day of the month. The following day, on the 1st of the month, I then decide what I'm going to use. So if the car has been sawn and I want to bring it back onto the road, on the 1st of the month, I will then tax that particular car. Now, if it's already taxed, I don't need to do anything, but if it has historically been sawn, on the 1st, I tax the car. That means when I tax it, I'm paying for the whole month anyway, so you might as well tax the car on the 1st of the month. That way, again, it's another 2-minute application, really quick, really simple, really straightforward. There is a slight premium for paying monthly, but it is not very much. And for the flexibility it gives you, then that's what I strongly recommend. So from a multi-car purposes, to keep costs down, actively managing what cars are taxed, what cars are sold, month-by-month basis, using the last day, first day, will prove to be, I think, you'll find invaluable, and it brings my bill down from probably a £2,000 per year to run 6 cars down to something around about £1,000. So next up is car insurance. Car insurance, if you've got more than one vehicle, and I assume most of you are that's watching this video, if you've got a second or third car, or you've got a collection of cars, I strongly recommend that you put them under one multi-car policy. Most companies do them. Some are capped. I know a couple are capped at 5, but there's several I've got for 6 cars, just because it gives you a lot more flexibility. And you must make sure, like always, that you shop around, use the relevant internet pages to do shopping around for car insurance. All the good ones that you use for a couple of hours once a year to do it. Again, loyalty, like always, it never really pays when it comes to any type of insurance. Car insurance is one, but multi-car insurance. Why do I say multi-car insurance? Because if you're like me, I chop and change my cars quite frequently. So, for example, this year, 3 cars have gone, left the group, and I've had 3 cars join the group. So if you can imagine, it means in theory, every second month, there's either an addition or a subtraction from my group of 6 cars, or from the garage of 6 cars. So having it all under one policy is so much easier. Now, what I do, traditionally, I would have always said, if you can afford it, you pay for the insurance outright in the year. I don't do that. What I seek is, under a group policy, I want flexibility of a group by paying monthly. And that means, because otherwise you'll be paying admin charges all the time for buying and for selling and for changing your policy. You're changing it all the time. Get something where you've got the flexibility to add and take cars in and out of your policy. And I find that so much easier. So what I do is, I've sold the car, inform the insurance, they adjust it, monthly outgoings now drops from X to Y. Following month, I've added another car in because I bought another car. It jumps from A to B, and so on and so on. And I find it quite manageable and quite affordable. Again, clearly depending on where you live, age, experience, fines, speeding fines, etc. So first one is about certainly shopping around one group policy. Make sure you consider voluntary excess. So car insurance will always come with compulsory excess, but if you're a pretty, and it's all risk reward basis, but if you have got a history of, do you know what, you're incredibly careful, you're happy to increase the excess to lower your premiums, it is definitely worth doing on some cars. Some not so much, and you can play what ifs on that with your insurance company to say, what is it actually more valuable to increase the excess on this one, and therefore bring the premiums down. And I've got different amount of voluntary excesses on different cars depending on how that has affected the premiums. So again, a bit of legwork, and it doesn't take too long, and you'll be able to find actually what the optimum amount of excess you should be paying to get your premiums down to something that you're comfortable with paying on a monthly basis. So that's on excess. The second one is on Most people that have multi-cars in their garage, multi-car insurance, will find that most of their cars, the second or the third cars, do not do the miles that they do on their everyday car. Make sure that your insurance reflects that. It's very easy for insurance to defer to 8, 10, 12,000 miles per annum. Well, in truth, for a second and third car, that is, for most people, that is just not the case. MX-5 here, that probably does 1,000 to 2,000 miles a year at most. If that's the case with one of your cars, the Scooby may do a few more, but again, it's only going to be a handful of 1,000 miles or so. Make sure your insurance reflects it. Don't default everything to standard. Make sure you seek out, because if it is only doing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 miles a year, make sure your insurance is informed of that, because that will definitely drop your premiums down. And the final point on car insurance as well is again what it is being used for. Most insurance will put down domestic, social, pleasure, domestic, and potentially commuting as well if you need commuting, and even business for people that need business. But if it's a second or third car, you don't need the domestic part in most cases, because actually it is purely a social or leisure vehicle. And again, that will lower your premium. So when you go through renewing your insurance, make sure you are as accurate as you can be. And if it is purely a weekend toy, the second or third car, then make sure the mileage is put limited down, and make sure you've got the right annotation of what the car's going to do. And if it is purely social and leisure, make sure it's documented as social and leisure as well. So there you go. Hopefully some tips there on what I do with regard to the UK road tax or vehicle excise duty and multi-car insurance as well, just to make sure that you don't cheat the system, but you only pay for what you should be paying for. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, as always, please thumbs up, subscribe, stay tuned, and I'll speak to you next week. Thanks for watching, everybody.